What record dares ask why the stars went silent, and who first taught eternity to hate the living? The chronicle awakens as if pried from a tomb world vault, its sigils flaring after 10,000 years of sanctioned ignorance. In the dark between prayers, scribes of the Imperium once whispered of a king who abdicated death itself, who watched his people trade flesh for forever, and learned too late the price of survival. The eternal war is not merely bolter fire and screaming warp storms, it is memory weaponized. Here, amid the dust of extinct empires, the silent king's shadow stretches across epochs. His name is forbidden not for what he destroyed, but for what he still intends. The archive trembles, ink bleeding like old wounds reopened. Faith falters when confronted with a purpose older than the Emperor's dream, colder than the void, patient enough to outlast hope itself. Before the Imperium learned to burn the stars in his name, the Necron tier gazed upon a universe that despised them. Short lives beneath hateful suns forged a civilization obsessed with legacy. Zarek, last and greatest of their triarchs, bore witness as his people bargained with gods that wore starfire as skin. The bargain was victory, immortality, dominion over all that crawled and breathed. The cost was the soul. When the Satan feasted, the Necrons awoke as living weapons, their consciousnesses caged in necrodermis shells. Zarek alone retained the burden of choice, and with it regret. He shattered the star gods, scattered their shards like broken idols, then commanded his people into the great sleep. This was not surrender. It was calculation. Even then, the silent king watched the galaxy age, waiting for a moment when decay would ripen into opportunity. As the Imperium rose on the bones of old night, Zarek walked the intergalactic void. Beyond the rim, he listened to the silence between galaxies, where even the warp thins to a whisper. There he learned a truth that no human saint has survived contemplating: chaos is not eternal. It is a symptom. The Imperium rages because life persists, because souls burn and bleed emotion into the abyss. To end the warp, one must end the conditions that feed it. Not annihilation, but transformation. Zarek's purpose crystallized in that emptiness. The Necrons were never meant to rule a dead galaxy. They were meant to cure it. A universe without souls would be a universe without gods, without demons, without the Emperor's fragile bargain. Peace through silence, order through absence. The Imperium would call it extinction. Zarek would call it mercy. When the silent king returned, tomb worlds stirred like mass graves learning to breathe. Dynasties reawakened, their pharaohs receiving fractured visions seeded during the long sleep. Many believed the old king sought dominion once more, a final war to reclaim stolen stars. They were wrong. Zarek spoke not of conquest, but of correction. He showed them projections of a future drowned in warp storms, where humanity's psychic bloom tore reality apart. He revealed calculations etched in chronometron light, pathways to invert the soul's relationship with matter. Biotransference had been a prototype, flawed and cruel. The next iteration would be universal, life remade into perfect, silent continuance. Some dynasties rebelled, clinging to ancient pride. Others listened. Across the galaxy, blackstone pylons awakened, their harmonics subtly choking the warp, testing a cage large enough to hold existence itself. The Imperium felt the change as an absence rather than an attack. Astropaths screamed as their visions dulled. Navigators wept blood as the Astronomicon flickered, not extinguished but muted, like a hymn sung underwater. On Cadia's ruins, ancient pylons hummed with a resonance older than mankind, and in distant sectors, demonic incursions faltered for reasons no inquisitor could fully explain. The ecclesiarchy called it a test of faith. The Ordo Xenos called it a weapon. Neither understood it was a rehearsal. Sarek observed humanity with a scholar's detachment. He saw their emperor, half god, half corpse, bound to a throne that fed on souls to keep the warp at bay. A crude solution. Temporary. The Silent King did not hate the Imperium. He pitied it. Humanity had stumbled upon the same problem as the Necron, armed only with prayer and sacrifice. In hidden vaults beneath dead stars, Necron cryptex refined the final equation. It did not require genocide in the crude sense. Worlds would not burn, populations would not scream. Instead, a cascading null field would pass through reality, a soft annihilation of the immaterial. Souls would be unhooked from the warp, crystallized into inert patterns, preserved without hunger or fear. Consciousness would persist, but devotion, rage, hope, these would fade like old scars. The galaxy would fall silent, not in death, but in equilibrium. Sarek knew this would also unmake the Chaos gods, starved without worship or emotion. Even the Emperor's divinity would gutter and fail. No gods, no demons, no eternal war. Only the cold, immaculate order of a universe finally cured of belief. The Necrons would become its custodians, wardens of a peace no living mind could truly desire. Yet the chronicle records a flaw, whispered in glyphs etched so faintly they border on heresy. In the void beyond the galactic halo, something watched Sarek's preparations with ancient interest. The Silent King had ventured there once and returned, changed. Some cryptex speak of equations interrupted, of probabilities that refuse to settle. The warp is not the only abyss. There are hungers older than emotion, intelligences that do not require souls to exist. By silencing the Imperium, Sarek may be clearing the stage, not ending the play. The tyrannid shadow looms, a devourer untouched by faith or fear. The Silent King knows this. Some say his true purpose is not to save the galaxy from chaos, but to harden it into a weapon capable of surviving what comes next. Imperial savants who piece together these fragments face execution or madness. To accept them is to admit the Emperor's dream is finite, that humanity's ascension feeds the very hell it fights. The Silent King becomes a paradox, executioner and savior, tyrant and physician. In secret, Blackstone networks expand, aligning to stellar ley lines older than Terra's crust. Every activation dampens the warp a fraction more. The galaxy grows quieter. Prayers take longer to answer. Miracles fail by imperceptible degrees. Somewhere on a tomb world lit by a dead sun, Sarek stands before a star map that no longer includes gods. His crown reflects a future where banners do not fly, because there is no wind of belief to carry them. The chronicle's final lines fracture, as if the data itself resists preservation. It suggests a moment approaching, a convergence when the null fields will resonate in unison. Not an apocalypse, but a correction event. Yet a single annotation mars the precision, a note attributed to Sarek himself. It speaks of an unknown variable, introduced during his exile beyond the stars. A signal received, not through the warp, but through reality's deeper strata. The Silent King proceeds regardless, convinced control is preferable to chaos. The archive ends with a question scratched into adamantium by a long-dead scribe, trembling with forbidden understanding. When the galaxy finally falls silent, who will be left to notice that something else has begun to speak? The silence left behind by the archive's last question did not fade. It settled into the Imperium like ash. In cathedral holds and gunmetal trenches, men and women felt it as a hesitation in prayer, a moment where the God Emperor's presence seemed to look past them. A veteran guardsman on a forgotten agri-world paused before firing, struck by the wrongness of calm between artillery barrages. A shrine priest found his litanies echoing back hollow, the words intact, but their weight diminished. None spoke of it aloud. To doubt was treason, yet doubt spread regardless. soft and patient. The galaxy had known endless war. It did not know what to do with quiet. In that quiet, ancient mechanisms aligned, and something within the Imperium's soul began to loosen, thread by sacred thread. Within the Libraria of Terra, sanctioned psychers reported dreams they could not catalogue. No demons clawed at them, no screaming warp storms, only vast geometric planes of black stone stretching beyond reason. A senior Lex mechanic cross-referenced the visions with proscribed Xenos data and felt a tremor of terror masquerading as revelation. The Necrons were not merely suppressing the warp, they were rewriting its absence. High Lords dismissed the reports as stress fractures in overworked minds, yet quietly increased censure protocols. Faith had always been the Imperium's armor. Now, armor showed hairline cracks. The ecclesiarchy declared days of penitence, but the incense burned thinner. Beneath the rituals, an unspoken fear festered. If the warp could be muted, then the Emperor's divinity, bound to it, might be contingent rather than absolute. On a border world reclaimed from heresy centuries ago, a sister of battle stood vigil before a relic that no longer warmed her presence. She remembered the first time she had felt the Emperor's gaze, an all-consuming certainty that erased fear. Now, certainty wavered. She struck down her doubt with harsher prayers, louder hymns, but the void between syllables grew. Elsewhere, an Astartes chaplain recorded a similar disturbance among his brothers. Zeal remained, discipline unbroken, yet the righteous fury that once surged like a second heart felt measured, restrained. Tactical clarity improved as fervor dimmed. Victory came easier but felt wrong. The warriors did not speak of it, but some wondered if faith had been a crutch all along, or if its loss heralded something far worse than defeat. In the shadowed corridors of the Inquisition, knowledge became currency sharpened into knives. Ordo Xenos and Ordo Hereticus turned their scrutiny inward, each suspecting the other of harboring contamination of belief. Radical cells whispered that the Necron null fields might be weaponized, that a controlled dampening of the warp could end demonic incursions forever. Puritans recoiled, naming such thought apostasy. Files vanished. Witnesses were reassigned to suicide fronts. One inquisitor, long loyal, disappeared after requesting audience with a Magos Dominus who studied Blackstone resonance. Officially, he died in transit. Unofficially, his last transmission contained a single phrase repeated until the signal cut. The Emperor did not plan for this. The words circulated in secret, poisoning certainty more efficiently than any Xenos blade. Beyond Imperial borders, Zarek observed these fractures with measured sorrow. He did not gloat. The Silent King understood belief as a resource, volatile, powerful, and ultimately corrosive. His envoys to lesser dynasties carried not threats, but data. Projections of a galaxy stabilized, its entropy slowed, its wars ended not through domination, but inevitability. Some pharaons balked at the implications. Others saw liberation. Yet even among the Necrons, dissent grew. A Cryptech council uncovered anomalies in the null field harmonics, deviations too consistent to ignore. Something was responding, adapting to the silence. Sarek ordered the findings sealed. The cure must proceed, he reasoned. To halt now would doom everything to the familiar madness of gods and screaming souls. On a forge moon orbiting a red dwarf, a tech priest uncovered an unregistered Blackstone pylon fragment embedded deep beneath Mechanicus vaults, predating Imperial occupation by millennia. Its activation log showed recent use, keyed by Imperial authorization codes that should not exist. The Magos felt the machine god's logic fracture as he traced the cipher's origin to the Senatorum Imperialis itself. Someone within Terra's highest echelons had been experimenting, not merely observing. The revelation never reached open vox. Instead, a kill team was dispatched, and the Forge Moon was declared lost to reactor failure. Yet the data had already been copied, whispered through noospheric channels like a digital ghost, impossible to fully erase. As the null field strengthened, warp storms receded in sectors once deemed cursed. Trade routes reopened. Refugees returned to worlds long abandoned. The Imperium celebrated cautiously, calling it divine favor, proof of the Emperor's unseen hand. But miracles felt procedural, predictable. Saints failed to manifest. The Astronomicon dimmed by degrees no instrument publicly acknowledged. In hidden chapels, some priests wept not from persecution, but from absence. Faith requires friction. Without resistance, devotion calcifies. A rogue cardinal preached that the Emperor demanded silence now, that obedience meant surrendering not just bodies, but souls. His sermons spread faster than censure could follow, resonating with those who felt the change and lacked words to name it. The final fracture came not with fire, but with disclosure. A sealed vault beneath the Imperial palace was breached by order of the High Lords, revealing a pre-heresy transcript never meant to survive. It recorded the Emperor himself theorizing a galaxy without the warp, a contingency should chaos prove undefeatable. The language was clinical, detached, and unfinished. The document ended with a warning that removing the warp would expose humanity to predators beyond perception, entities patient enough to wait for silence. The High Lords ordered the vault resealed, the record purged. Too late. Copies had already escaped. Across the Imperium, belief reeled as a forbidden truth took root. The Silent King's plan was not alien blasphemy, but an echo of the Emperor's own uncompleted design. The wars did not cease when faith faltered. They grew stranger. On a besieged shrine world, a lone confessor knelt beneath a dying star whose light bled red through cracked cathedral glass. He had preached certainty his entire life, yet now every prayer felt like a confession of fear. Around him, the faithful died with hymns on their lips that no longer stirred the air. He wondered, in his final moments, whether belief had ever been strength or merely noise that drowned out terror. When the Necron legions advanced, their weapons sang without hatred, without triumph. The confessor felt no malice from them, only inevitability. As the star dimmed, he whispered the Emperor's name one last time, and felt nothing answer. The silence was not cruel. That frightened him more than any demon ever had. Across the Segmentum Obscurus, battle lines shattered under forces no tactician could fully map. Warp routes collapsed into clean, sterile corridors of real space, stripping navigators of their sacred purpose. A fleet master, once devout beyond reproach, stared at star charts that now required no prayer to read. His faith curdled into anger. If the Emperor's light was fading, then what had all the sacrifice been for? He ordered bombardments that served no strategy, only grief. In the carnage, he felt briefly alive again, righteous fury masking despair. Yet each world burned without the familiar psychic aftertaste of damnation. The galaxy was becoming efficient, stripped of excess suffering. That, more than defeat, unsettled him. War without damnation felt obscene, as if conflict itself were being reduced to a mechanical process devoid of meaning. A sanctioned psyker named Helior felt the change most intimately. His connection to the warp had always been agony tempered by purpose, a sacred wound through which the Emperor's will flowed. Now the pain dulled. Visions came slower, quieter, edged with alien geometry rather than screaming faces. He feared the loss even as relief crept in. Without the warp's roar, who was he? During a moment of forced communion, Helior glimpsed something vast beneath reality, a lattice of cold order threading the stars. It was beautiful. It was wrong. He collapsed, sobbing not from terror, but from the realization that humanity might survive without him. and without the Emperor's intermediaries. That night, he prayed for the warp to return, even if it meant damnation. Nothing answered. In the quiet, Helior felt the first true doubt of his life bloom into despair. On Terra, beneath layers of sanctified stone, a remembrancer priest uncovered a sealed ossuary predating the Great Crusade. The bones within were not human, yet bore inscriptions in proto-Gothic prayers. They spoke of a covenant made not with gods, but against them. The priest's hands trembled as he deciphered the final inscription, a warning that the warp was never meant to be humanity's ally, only its shield against something older and colder. The Emperor had not mastered the Imperium, he had weaponized it. Faith itself had been a bulwark, feeding chaos just enough to keep a greater darkness at bay. The priest burned the ossuary, weeping as he committed the ultimate sacrilege, destroying truth to preserve sanity. Even as the ashes cooled, he knew the knowledge would resurface. Secrets that ancient do not stay buried when the galaxy begins to forget how to scream. Sharek watched the Imperium's unraveling with a king's sorrow and a mathematician's resolve. His calculations grew more complex as resistance mounted, not military, but existential. The null fields did not merely silence chaos, they revealed structural voids beneath reality. In these voids, patterns shifted. Something vast adjusted its attention. The Silent King recalled the signal he had detected beyond the galactic rim, a pulse that predated stars, responding now with increasing clarity. He wondered for the first time in eons whether his cure would invite a greater disease. Yet retreat was impossible. The galaxy's momentum had turned. To restore the warp now would tear reality apart. Sharek chose forward motion, accepting that salvation and doom often wear the same crown. In his stillness, a flicker of something almost human passed. Regret sharpened into resolve. Among the Astartes, cracks widened. A chapter-long celebrated for unwavering devotion began to fracture as battle brothers reported diminished visions and muted zeal. One captain confessed to his chaplain that he felt clearer without divine fire clouding his thoughts. The chaplain struck him down for heresy, yet later, alone, felt the same clarity and hated himself for it. Discipline held, but reverence decayed into ritual habit. The Emperor remained an icon, yet icons do not bleed. When the chapter faced a demonic incursion that simply failed to manifest, their victory tasted hollow. They had trained for hell and found only absence. The captain's words lingered like a forbidden mantra. What if the Emperor had been wrong to bind humanity to gods at all? The thought lingered long after the execution, metastasizing in silence. In the depths of a dying forge world, a Magos Dominus enacted an experiment forbidden by both Mechanicus and Creed. He synchronized a Blackstone array with a fragment of the Astronomican's resonance, attempting to map their interaction. The result was catastrophic revelation rather than explosion. For a fraction of a second, the veil lifted entirely. The Magos perceived a vast architecture beneath existence, an ancient containment lattice holding back something that was not warp, not matter, but hunger without emotion. The warp had been noise, distraction. Faith had been insulation. As the null field strengthened, the lattice weakened. The Magos laughed as his mind unraveled, broadcasting his data before execution protocols could silence him. His final words echoed through forbidden channels. We were never alone. We were only loud. The Imperium reeled as fragments of this truth spread, stripped of context yet heavy with implication. Faith did not simply decay, it inverted. Some clung harder, praying louder as if volume could restore meaning. Others abandoned belief entirely, embracing the cold efficiency of a godless galaxy. Wars erupted not just between species, but between interpretations of survival. Inquisitors burned worlds to preserve doctrine even as the warp receded, their violence increasingly purposeless. Amid the chaos, the Emperor's presence on the Golden Throne flickered, not dying, but changing. Custodians reported subtle shifts in the throne's energies, as if its function were being repurposed by forces beyond understanding. The master of mankind, bound and silent, seemed less like a beacon and more like a keystone, one that might soon be removed. The final revelation came quietly, as such truths always do. In a sealed chamber beneath Terra, the throne interfaced with the expanding null field network for the first time. Observers expected collapse or transcendence. Instead, the Emperor's psychic shadow flared, not with divinity, but with containment protocols older than humanity itself. The truth crystallized in that moment. The Emperor had never sought godhood. He had sought to replace the warp as the galaxy's lock, a living seal against what lay beneath. Sarek's plan would succeed, but in doing so, it would remove the last barrier. As alarms screamed and reality trembled, a new presence stirred beyond the lattice, awakened not by faith, but by silence. And somewhere in that vast, patient darkness, something recognized the galaxy as finally ready to be claimed. The galaxy inhaled, holding its breath as if instinctively aware that exhalation might invite annihilation. On battlefields where banners once snapped in psychic winds, only the clatter of armor remained. Soldiers marched because marching was all they had left, their oaths echoing hollow inside helms scarred by 10,000 wars. A veteran of 100 crusades paused before the charge, remembering a childhood prayer taught by a mother long turned to ash. He recited it anyway, not expecting salvation, only rhythm, something to steady his heart before the guns roared. Around him, silence pressed like gravity, broken at last by the thunder of artillery. In that moment between calm and fury, he understood the truth too late. Devotion had never guaranteed victory, only endurance. The Emperor had asked them to endure everything, even the loss of meaning itself. Across the void, fleets repositioned with ruthless precision. Admirals no longer waited for omens or auguries. They trusted mathematics and cold probability. Efficiency replaced zeal. Worlds fell faster, reclaimed faster, processed like entries in a ledger of extinction. Yet each victory left commanders restless. Without the warp's madness to blame, every atrocity felt personal. An orbital bombardment erased a rebellious hive city in minutes, its screams never touching the Imperium. The void swallowed them whole. The Admiral watched the planet burn and felt no divine absolution, only the quiet understanding that he would carry those deaths alone. The galaxy had always been cruel, but cruelty once shared its burden with gods. Now there were no intermediaries, every decision carved directly into the soul of the one who made it. In a shattered basilica, a priest knelt amid rubble, fingers tracing the aquila etched into his chest plate. He had executed heretics without hesitation, convinced righteousness justified all bloodshed. Now he wondered if faith had been a convenient mask for fear of insignificance. The Emperor had been the axis around which his life spun. With that axis faltering, the priest felt unmoored. He tore pages from sacred texts, not to destroy them, but to remember their weight, their texture, proof that belief had once been tangible. When Necron constructs breached the basilica, he did not curse them. He rose, Crozius in hand, and charged not for salvation but defiance. His death was swift, his faith unresolved. The silence afterward felt heavier than any choir of lamentation. On Terra, the custodians stood immovable around the Golden Throne, their vigilance unbroken even as certainty eroded beneath their feet. They had guarded the Emperor for millennia, believing his will immutable. Now the throne's energies fluctuated, harmonizing with the spreading null fields in patterns no custodian training had prepared them to interpret. One among them, ancient beyond measure, remembered a fragment of conversation overheard long ago. Words about sacrifice not as worship, but as necessity. He wondered if their vigil had always been misinterpreted, if they were wardens rather than guardians. The thought was treasonous, yet it lodged deep, unremovable. Still they stood, spears grounded, prepared to die for a truth they could no longer clearly define. Sharek advanced his design with the inevitability of stellar collapse. Blackstone networks synchronized across sectors, their resonance tightening the lattice beneath reality. Each activation felt like a verdict passed on existence itself. The Silent King watched reports of Imperial schisms with measured calm, yet the signal from beyond the galaxy grew stronger, its patterns aligning disturbingly well with his own constructs. He told himself coincidence was impossible at such scales, even as doubt, an emotion he had buried beneath metal and millennia, resurfaced. The Necrons had traded souls for certainty once before. This time, Zarek feared certainty might be the true enemy. Still, he pressed on. To halt now would fracture reality beyond repair. Better to risk awakening something ancient than to doom the galaxy to endless war and screaming gods. Among humanity's defenders, Astartes chapters splintered along philosophical fault lines. Some doubled down on ritual, clinging to catechisms as anchors against dissolution. Others embraced cold rationality, treating the Emperor as a historical figure rather than divine presence. Brothers who had bled together now faced one another across ruined cities, bolters raised not in hatred, but sorrow. A captain hesitated before firing on former kin, his gene-forged heart aching with a grief no litany could soothe. When the order came, he obeyed. Duty remained, even stripped of sanctity. The galaxy reshaped itself around such betrayals, each one a micro-fracture spreading outward, altering alliances, doctrines, destinies. War did not end when belief died. It became more intimate, more unforgiving. In the void between stars, the Astronomicon flickered again, not dimming but shifting frequency. Astropaths collapsed across the Imperium, clutching their skulls as a new sensation washed through them, not pain, but pressure, as if reality itself leaned closer. Visions erupted unbidden, vast shadows moving beneath a lattice of light, testing its strength with patient curiosity. These were not demons. There was no hunger for worship, no rage or excess, only awareness. The astropath's screams echoed through chambers built to contain madness, their minds shattering under the weight of something too fundamental to name. Reports were sealed, executions ordered, but the damage was done. The galaxy had been noticed. On a remote world where soldiers prepared for a last stand, silence fell moments before the enemy arrived. The calm was absolute, a void so complete it felt artificial. Veterans recognized it as the pause before annihilation. They checked weapons, exchanged glances heavy with unspoken apologies. One young trooper whispered a prayer learned in secret, unsure who might hear. When the sky tore open, not with warp fire, but with a precise geometric incision, the defenders realized this was not another battle. It was an adjustment. Reality itself was being rewritten overhead, indifferent to heroism or despair. Deep beneath terror, alarms howled as the Golden Throne's containment fields surged beyond projected limits. The Emperor's presence flared, not outward but inward, reinforcing structures unseen. Tech priests screamed binary prayers as systems never meant to interface locked into alignment with the Necron lattice. In that convergence, a final truth crystallized. The throne was not failing. It was being overridden. Zarek's network and the Emperor's design were converging into a single function, one neither had fully intended. As the lattice strained, a voice, neither warp nor matter, echoed through the bones of creation, not hostile, not welcoming, but expectant. And in that moment, the galaxy understood with chilling clarity that the final choice had already been made by hands long turned to dust. The moment broke like a bone under too much weight. Across Terra, across 1,000 battlefronts, across the silent corridors between stars, reality convulsed as the lattice tightened and the Emperor's throne flared with a light that was never meant to be seen by mortal eyes. Alarms became screams, prayers shattered into fragments. For an instant that felt like an age, every living mind felt the same pressure, a hand closing around the galaxy, not in anger, but in correction. Warriors froze mid-charge, shells hanging in the air before impact. Admirals clutched command thrones as star maps dissolved into impossible geometries. Faith surged, not as comfort, but as instinct, the last reflex of a species that had survived by believing something cared whether it lived or died. Within the throne chamber, the custodians stood as they always had, but now their shadows bent the wrong way. The Emperor's presence surged, vast and terrible, not as a god demanding worship, but as a mechanism reaching its final tolerance. Golden light fractured into hard angles, bleeding into the black stone harmonics, flooding the palace's foundations. For the first time in 10,000 years, the Emperor's will moved with purpose rather than endurance. He did not speak in words. He acted. The throne's conduits reversed, drawing in the null field resonance, binding it to his own ancient design. In that convergence, the custodians understood their true role at last. They were not guardians of a ruler. They were anchors, lives forged to pin a living lock in place. One by one they fell, not slain, but spent, their existence consumed to stabilize the impossible union forming at the heart of mankind's empire. Sharek felt it across the galaxy, a shockwave through probability itself. His calculations screamed error, cascading failures branching into futures he had never allowed himself to imagine. The Emperor was not resisting. He was adapting. The Silent King watched his Blackstone network resonate in harmony with a human artifact, older than the Imperium, older even than the Great Crusade's lies. For the first time since biotransference, Sharek hesitated. He had sought to remove gods from the equation, to silence the warp and starve chaos into oblivion. Instead, he had completed a design begun by a being who understood sacrifice in ways even Necrons could not. The galaxy was not being cured. It was being reforged into a single vast containment engine with humanity, bleeding, believing humanity as its core component. Chaos erupted where order had reigned moments before. Demonic incursions flared violently, then collapsed as if strangled mid-birth. Psychers screamed as their connection to the warp was severed and rethreaded through something colder, heavier. Some died instantly, minds unable to survive the transition. Others emerged changed, their powers diminished but controlled, stripped of the wild excess that had always courted damnation. On battlefields, Necron legions halted as their protocols stuttered, weapons dimming under a new command signal, not entirely Sharek's. Imperial forces faltered, unsure whether to advance or kneel. In the chaos, acts of courage flared briefly and burned out, soldiers dragging wounded comrades into cover, chaplains shouting litanies even as they felt nothing listening. War did not stop. It transformed, its fury sharpened by confusion rather than zeal. In the void beyond the lattice, the thing that had been waiting stirred fully awake. It pressed against the containment not with rage, but curiosity, testing the strength of this new configuration. For a heartbeat of cosmic time, the galaxy teetered. The Emperor's presence flared brighter than it had since the Horus heresy, not as a god ascending, but as a warden assuming final duty. Countless souls were drawn into the throne's field, willing, unwilling, unknown, fuel for a seal that demanded living belief as mortar. Across the Imperium, people felt it as a sudden, crushing clarity. Faith surged, not because it was commanded, but because it was needed. billions prayed not for salvation, but to hold the line, instinctively understanding that their belief was no longer worship, but load-bearing structure. Sharek made his choice then, a decision that would define his people's fate more than biotransference ever had. He ordered the network stabilized, not maximized. The null fields stopped short of total silence, preserving just enough warp resonance to feed the Emperor's containment without letting chaos breathe freely. It was compromise, imperfect and eternal. Some Necron dynasties rebelled instantly, their pharaohs decrying the betrayal of the original plan. Others obeyed, recognizing the brutal elegance of shared burden. The Silent King did not justify himself. He merely watched as his species became not rulers of a silent galaxy, but custodians of a prison that spanned reality itself. For the first time in millions of years, Sharek bore responsibility not just for his people, but for every living thing that would now exist inside this fragile equilibrium. The climax passed not with an explosion, but with a settling. The lattice locked. The warp receded into a controlled turbulence, no longer a screaming ocean, but a contained storm. The Astronomicon stabilized at a lower, steadier output, no longer a beacon of divine supremacy, but a structural node in a vast metaphysical machine. On Terra, the throne dimmed, its golden radiance reduced to a steady, painful glow. The Emperor remained, alive, bound, diminished, and essential. The cost was incalculable. Entire orders of psychers burned out, millions died in the transition. Countless more felt something within them close forever. Yet the galaxy did not end. It endured, quieter, heavier, reshaped by a truth too vast to celebrate. In the aftermath, silence returned, different now. Not the expectant hush before disaster, but the exhausted quiet after survival. Fleets drifted amid debris fields, commanders issuing orders with voices stripped of triumph. On shrine worlds, priests rewrote doctrine in careful, trembling strokes, framing faith not as promise of reward, but as civic duty to existence itself. Astartes knelt before the Emperor's icon, not as a god, but as a martyr engine, a being who had accepted eternal agony to keep something worse at bay. Necron tomb worlds adjusted to their new role, their endless sentinels now guardians of balance rather than harbingers of extinction. The eternal war did not end. It changed its meaning. Yet beneath this fragile equilibrium, something subtle shifted. In the deepest layers of the lattice, where Emperor and Blackstone intertwined, a pattern emerged that neither human nor Necron design accounted for. The containment held, the pressure eased, and in that easing, a minute flaw formed, not a breach, but a possibility. Somewhere in the galaxy a child was born without a soul, as the old definitions understood it, yet fully conscious, fully alive. No warp echo followed their first breath, no divine notice marked their existence. The galaxy endured, unaware that for the first time since creation, something entirely new had entered the equation. The wars receded like tides that no longer knew which moon to obey. I write this as a remembrancer, not sanctioned by any High Lord, but permitted by exhaustion itself. Across the stars, battlefields lie quiet, their dead uncounted because no one remembers which ledger mattered. Bolters rust in the rain of poisoned worlds. Banners hang in tatters from spires that once rang with hymns powerful enough to shake reality. Now the wind passes through them without reverence. I walked a plain where 1 million died in the Emperor's name and found only scorched earth and the faint hum of containment fields beneath my boots. No demons clawed at my shadow, no miracles answered my steps. Only silence, heavy and complete, as if the galaxy itself were listening to its own breathing for the first time. On Terra, the palace still stands, but it feels smaller now, like a relic shrunk by truth. Pilgrims arrive in endless lines, kneeling before gates that no longer promise salvation, only continuation. They pray anyway, not because they expect reward, but because prayer has become labor, a contribution to the unseen architecture holding reality together. I watched an old woman press her forehead to the stone and whisper thanks, not to the emperor, but to existence for not ending today. The custodians still stand vigil, fewer now, their golden armor dulled, their purpose clarified and therefore heavier. They are not symbols, they are load-bearing pillars. The throne hums softly beneath the palace, not triumphant, not dying but enduring, like a wound that refuses to close because closing would doom everything else. Beyond the core worlds, Astartes chapters rebuild in silence. Training halls echo with commands stripped of scripture. Gene-forged warriors still kneel before icons, but their prayers are different, shorter, more personal, spoken like confessions rather than proclamations. I saw one space marine stand alone before a ruined chapel, helm removed, face scarred by centuries of war. He did not ask for victory. He asked whether endurance itself could still be called virtue. No answer came. He replaced his helm and returned to his brothers, because duty remains even when meaning fractures. Perhaps especially then. The Adeptus Astartes were made to protect humanity's future. Now they protect its present, one day at a time, without knowing what future belief will allow. On distant tomb worlds, Necron sentinels patrol in patterns altered by reluctant mercy. Sharek's edict echoes through dynasties like a scar that will never fade. Preservation over perfection. Some Pharaons plot rebellion in silence, unable to accept a universe that requires compromise. Others adapt, finding grim purpose in guardianship rather than dominion. The Silent King himself has not been seen since the Convergence. Some say he watches from beyond mapped space, ensuring the balance holds. Others whisper that he stands vigil closer than anyone suspects, bound by guilt to a galaxy he tried to cure, and instead condemned to survival. The Necrons won their war against gods long ago. Now they fight something far more exhausting: responsibility. Across the galaxy, psychers relearn themselves. Some are gone, burned out like candles that flared too brightly. Others remain quieter, steadier, their powers constrained by new laws written into reality's bones. I met one who said the warp feels distant now, like thunder beyond mountains rather than a storm inside the skull. He mourned the loss even as he slept without screaming for the first time in his life. Humanity has always paid for progress in blood and memory. This time it paid in excess. Excess emotion, excess divinity, excess certainty. What remains is leaner, harder, and perhaps more honest. Or perhaps simply more desperate. The child born without a soul, as the old definitions named it, has not been found. Or perhaps has been found too many times, unnoticed because nothing screamed at their existence. Some inquisitors hunt quietly for anomalies. Others have closed their files, unwilling to chase questions that threaten what little stability remains. If such children grow, if they become a generation untouched by the warp's echo, what will they believe? What will they dream? Will they free the galaxy from its ancient dependencies, or weaken the last seal holding something worse at bay? I do not know. I record the question and leave it unanswered, as all honest chronicles must. Sometimes, when the stars are particularly still, I imagine the Emperor upon his throne. Not as a god, not as a corpse, but as a figure holding back a door that was never meant to open. I imagine his thoughts, if any remain, stretched thin across eternity. Did he foresee this ending? Or is this simply another adaptation in a war against inevitability? Was faith ever meant to save us, or only to buy time? And if survival requires endless sacrifice, at what point does endurance become another form of damnation? I close this chronicle as banners fade and the galaxy learns to live with quieter horrors. The eternal war did not end. It grew older. So did we. If these words reach you across the void, remember them not as prophecy, but as witness. Stand witness with me. If this story moved you, if its questions linger like echoes in your mind, lend it your voice. Like, subscribe, share this chronicle, and leave your thoughts in the comments, so the silence never fully wins.